Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Bonds and Stories, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. I was 33, the summer the Thunderheads parked above Milwaukee, and pretended to be merciful. The yard smelled like lighter fluid and wet grass. My mother set folding tables in rows as if we were hosting a festival instead of a Sunday cookout. Corn sweated in foil. Vivian stood at the head of the table. She tapped the checkered plastic with 2 polished knuckles. "Avery," she said, "we need a favor, 150,000. Today, my father Walter was salting watermelon slices, eyes gliding past me. Sloane leaned her elbows on the table and smiled like a camera was near. "It's not need," she said. "It's positioning. What board I asked, though I knew. There was always a board somewhere." "Evergreen learning," Vivian said. "The pledge goes public tonight. We had a processing hiccup." She made the word sound like a coffee stain. "You can transfer from savings. You're a practical girl." A mosquito landed on my forearm, precise as punctuation. I brushed it away. No. The speaker popped, then settled into a guitar solo that pretended to be endless. Vivian blinked once, then twice. "I'm not joking." "I heard you," I said. "My answer's no." The yard tilted. Or maybe the storm made a shadow out of the sky. Vivian's mouth became a line. "Your sister's work reflects on this family. You will not embarrass us." Sloane's smile didn't move. "It's a shortfall, Ave. You wire it, they announce it, everyone breathes." "I'd like to breathe without wiring anything," I said. The slap came quick and well-timed, like a metronome striking the beat I should have kept. Heat burst along my cheekbone. The world sharpened into a calm I did not trust. My father set the salt down, then adjusted the foil on the corn. No one said sorry. No one asked if I was all right. That was not how we did things in the Lane family. We moved food. We arranged optics. We smoothed the tablecloth where the handprint might show. "I'm done," I said. My voice sounded like it had learned to walk. Rain began the way it does in the Midwest, first as gossip on leaves. Vivian reached for a napkin and dabbed at her wrist as if the weather had splashed her. "Avery, do not be theatrical." "Hand me the keys if you're driving," Walter said, still not looking up. He was always safest with verbs that belonged to objects, drive, fix, mow, haul. "I have my own," I said. "They were in my pocket heavy as coins. You don't spend because you like the weight." Sloane finally moved fingertip drifting to the condensation ring her glass had left. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said softly. "I brought potato salad," I said, "because I needed a sentence that belonged to me. It's on the second shelf of the fridge." "Don't forget the paprika." The memory arrived uninvited. 2 birthday cakes in 1 oven, the good frosting scraped onto Sloane's, and the store brand on mine. Vivian saying surprises created clutter. Walter smoothing a wrinkle in a tablecloth. Sloane at 13 whispering that needy girls never get invited anywhere. Me at 16 washing bowls after midnight because clean things could not be argued with. I carried the potato salad through the rain and left it on the counter. In the hall mirror, I was a person with a red mark and steady eyes. The china cabinet glowed behind the glass, each plate edged with vines that refused to touch. Back outside, Vivian was funneling people into the garage. "Stay," she said, which meant obey. "We'll sort this out. I'm going." I tucked my keys between my fingers the way a runner does when the neighborhood gets noisy. "Family helps family," she said. "I'm family too," I said. Sloane's hat dripped a neat line of rain onto her shoulder. "We all know you're good with numbers," she said. "This is arithmetic." "It's respect," I said. The storm committed. A hard sheet swept the table, flipping paper plates. I moved toward the side gate. Walter finally spoke to me and not the vegetables. "You're being difficult," he said, which was how he named any problem that could not be fixed with a socket wrench. "I'm being clear," I said. By the time I reached the car, my shirt clung, and my hair had given up any plan. The dashboard smelled like sun-heated plastic and last week's coffee. I started the engine and sat with the wipers working hard, as if they believed effort were a kind of prayer. A text from my mother arrived. "Come back now. Don't make a scene." Another from Sloane. "The pledge is timed. Don't be petty." A third from an unknown number linked to a glossy press release draft that already included our surname. I turned the phone face down. My cheek cooled. The outline of her hand remained more map than wound. I could have cried. I didn't. I took inventory left turn signal working gas a little above half oil change due next month. The rain intensified until the world was made of streaks. I watched the gate in the rear view as it swung and then shuttered closed. I remembered how at 8, I learned to measure silence by the length of a hallway. At 12, how to be useful enough to pass inspection. At 20, how to send money without adding a note. Usefulness was the family currency. Attention belonged to whoever could spend it best in public. I eased the car into the street. The tires hissed over the curb water. The windshield framed the neighborhood in watery squares, a tricycle on its side. A flag half committed the mail carrier hurrying under a poncho the color of caution tape. At the corner light, I waited for the arrow and held the only sentence that felt sturdy. I will not make a deposit into a ledger that forgets my name. The arrow flicked green. I turned. Rain bled into night as I took the interstate north. The wipers worked a small miracle clearing, just enough glass to keep the world arguable. I drove past cookie-cutter subdivisions, past a fireworks stand sagging under a tarp, past a billboard promising new teeth in one day. The highway shouldered me like an old friend who didn't ask questions. At a gas station outside Port Washington, I bought a coffee that tasted like diligence and a map I didn't need. The attendant slid me a pen. "You from around here?" he asked, eyes on the storm. "Not anymore," I said, and drew a line up the shore of Lake Michigan as if I were discovering it. The paper made a sound like a secret being folded. I kept moving until the exits grew sparse, and the road curled toward the great inland water that looks like an ocean if you don't squint. Lake Superior holds weather the way a bank holds debt cold, patient, unimpressed. The town I'd chosen had a marina and a bait shop, and a sheriff who divided his time between paperwork and fixing the same swinging door with a butter knife. I rented a kayak with a plastic tag that said 17. The teenage clerk gave me a sunburned grin and a waiver. "Wind shifts fast," he said. "Keep near shore." "Sure," I said, and slid the boat onto black-green water that smelled like iron and pine. I wore the bright vest, then took it off when I was out far enough that the dock talk turned to gulls. I let the vest trail by a strap, then dragged it across a rock until the fabric pilled like a sweater. My library card sat in a zip bag with a corner cut away. The bag leaked slowly, convincingly. The phone I'd brought for the purpose buzzed, once then drowned without drama. There is a kind of quiet that belongs to big water. It took my breath and gave it back colder. I counted strokes until numbers became their own weather. When the clouds lifted a little, I guided the kayak toward a cove thick with reeds, beached it where footprints dissolve into everything else, and walked a mile along a deer path only deer seemed to know. The road I reached had no shoulder and no cameras. A truck came and went. I waited for nothing in particular until nothing felt like enough, then stuck out my thumb like a person who still believed in the kindness of strangers. The woman who stopped drove a dented Pontiac with a St. Christopher bauble on the dash. She had the face of someone who knows how to make soup out of anything. Headed where she asked. "South," I said. "Anywhere south." She laughed once. "Aren't we all?" I got out 2 towns later, paid cash for a room with a bolted window, and slept on top of the covers with my shoes by the door and my keys under the pillow. Morning came brassy and unromantic. I brushed my teeth with a finger and watched the local news. A camera panned the lake, then a dock, then the sheriff whose butter knife had lost the battle with the door again. He spoke about currents and safety and the importance of wearing vests. A woman off-screen said something about a stray kayak. The crawl mispronounced my last name. It was close enough. I left before checkout. In Green Bay, I bought a bus ticket under a name that could be anybody's aunt. I slept and woke and watched corn arrange itself by the mile until the bus surrendered me to a station where the ceiling fans moved heat from one corner to another like a rumor. Santa Fe was a word on a departures board that looked like a dare. I took it. The desert did not ask for my story. It offered sun and distance and a kind of mercy that arrives as dryness. The studio over the pottery shop was the size of a thought I could keep straight. The landlord gave me a discount if I agreed to water the courtyard succulents. I overwatered for a week, then learned restraint. By the 2nd month, the plants and I had an understanding. A pair of thrift store shears solved the length of my hair. I bought clear frames so I could see the lines I drew, and so people could see through whatever they thought those frames meant. I found work with small businesses that needed spreadsheets to stop lying to them. It was enough to keep the studio and the quiet. Then the quiet began to make room. I built a prototype that did only one thing: follow a receipt until it blushed. Public schools buy everything except glory. They buy milk and mop heads, whiteboard markers, tablets that work when they feel like it, metal chairs that sing when dragged. My code read invoices like they were gossip dates, vendors' quantities, then compared them against what had entered the loading dock and what had never arrived. I called it CIVITAS Trace because the simpler names were taken and because the Latin made grantmakers feel handsome. The tool liked rules, so I wrote it some. Flag exact duplicates. Flag cousins, same truck number, different receipt. Flag vendors that share an address with a cardboard company that shares an address with somebody's cousin's P.O. box. Map everything to a calendar in case paydays and decisions were too friendly. Store hashes so documents couldn't be argued with just because someone disliked them later. I needed eyes other than mine. I met Yara Ortiz at a coffee shop whose pastry case looked like it kept secrets too. She wore a denim jacket with a patch that read, "Forensics is a verb." She reviewed my code the way a violin teacher reviews a bow hand. "Your chain of custody logic is decent," she said, "but your intake is trusting. Treat PDFs like feral cats." She sent me 4 case studies with names redacted in a black so glossy it reflected my face. We sat in the courtyard among succulents that forgave nothing. Yara asked if I was careful. I asked what careful meant. She smiled like someone backing a trailer without a wobble. Separate devices, separate drives, separate use. I bought a secondhand laptop from a man who did not know what it had been. I learned to label drives as if the labels were lies: seed corn, lint, trap camping tent. I rented a mailbox at a store that sold cowboy hats and did fingerprinting on Thursdays. I kept receipts for everything and taught the tool to keep mine too. Work is a kind of climate. Mine turned warm. A district in New Mexico let me test a plugin for lunch accounting. We called it Lunch Ledger because it was plain spoken. The cafeteria manager hairnet, and the authority of someone who knows which kids are hungry on Mondays, tapped through the interface with a frown that softened exactly once. "If this saves me 10 minutes a day, I'll use it," she said. It saved her 12. At night, the fan in the studio chopped the darkness into manageable pieces. The pottery shop downstairs baked its prayers. I cooked eggs in a skillet that had been faithful to someone else before me. I learned the paths the garbage trucks took, and the hour the neighbor played trumpet so softly it sounded like a throat clearing. My cheekbone healed. The red turned memory, then map, then almost nothing. I didn't miss the lake. I missed the idea that water could hold a story without spilling it. The desert kept mine and returned it to me in fragments I could stack without fear of collapse. I stacked them: code custody, caution coffee, quiet. One afternoon, the pottery shop owner knocked and handed me a package I hadn't ordered. The return label was a P.O. box from a city where I did not live anymore. Inside, a spiral notebook with graph paper, a roll of tamper-evident tape, and a note in tidy block letters. "For your windows, no signature." I pressed the tape's edge with my thumb and liked how it fought back when lifted. I built a window in CIVITAS Trace that showed document provenance like a train schedule. Tap to verify, tap to doubt. The day ran out of heat. I took a walk past adobe walls the color of bread. A food truck parked at the end of the block, and the chef handed me a folded taco without charging. "First-timer," he said. I ate, standing a habit I had not entirely abandoned. The salsa stung, then steadied. On the way home, I bought a second plant I did not need. It was a bad idea. I kept it anyway. The studio smelled like damp soil and clay dust, and the cheap candle I lit when the code behaved. I saved my work twice and labeled the save with a date and an hour, because time matters when people argue. The fan clicked once and kept going. I lay down with my shoes by the door, my keys under the pillow, and a name that fit like something I'd worn long enough to forget it was new. The studio's fan clicked once and steadied the way it did when the day had chosen a direction. I set 2 mugs on the sill and opened CIVITAS Trace. The provenance window showed tidy lines like a trainboard file hash time device. The tamper tape from the package sat beside my keyboard, a strip of stubborn truth. An email arrived from a coordinator. I didn't know who had heard about lunch ledger from a cafeteria manager who preferred not to be admired. The subject line was plain program review, inquiry, Bright County. The body asked for a consult on vendor intake small scope short timeline. Some of our partners are eager to streamline. There was a signature block with a phone number, and the evergreen leaf in miniature. I called Yara first. Evergreen, she said. Common name, uncommon patterns. Keep your windows open. Which windows? All of them, she said, then texted me a checklist scrub metadata burner intake compartment everything. I could hear street noise behind her, a siren that didn't hurry. I flew into a sky the color of old coins and landed under clouds that remembered where I grew up better than I did. Bright County housed its ambition in a low-glass building with sedges arranged to look accidental. The receptionist handed me a sticker and a visitor's lanyard with edges soft from years of necks. Sloane was in the lobby before my lanyard figured out where it wanted to sit. She wore a jacket the color of applause and a smile that knew its angles. Nora, right, she said, pronouncing the vowels like pearls. We've heard such good things. She didn't flinch at my face, didn't narrow her eyes into the past. The name on my sticker was the only name in the room. Thanks for the invitation, I said. Invitation, she laughed lightly. It's a summons. Come on, Riley's waiting. Riley Thorne's office looked like a financial aspirational ad glass of plant that refused to dye a view of water pretending to be ocean. He stood and shook my hand with 2 pumps efficient. We're not in trouble, he said before I'd sat. We just want to be ahead. Being ahead is cheaper, I said, and slid my notebook onto the table. He had a pile of folders that pretended to be nothing. I thought we could walk through last quarter's STEM initiative, he said. There were some, what did we call them, Sloane? Hiccups, she said, remembering how our mother smoothed the word. I opened the window on my laptop that looked like a simple grid and wasn't. Let's start with intake, I said. Who touches a vendor before a dollar moves? And all. Riley gestured with a pen. Procurement me sometimes a program lead, then procurement again. We're nimble. Nimble is good, I said, and expensive when it forgets to write things down. I slid a paper copy of a flowchart across the table, not because they needed it, but because fingers remember in ways eyes don't. I'll need sample packets. I added 5 to 10 vendors, 2 cycles sanitized if you prefer. Sanitized is best, he said, reaching for a folder before thinking better of it. We'll send by end of day. Sloane perched on the edge of a chair phone face down as if she were resisting temptation for sport. We're hosting the Scholars Gala next month, she said. Evergreen wants to highlight work that works. Riley flicked a glance at her. Focus, he said almost fondly. Nora, your software the little lunch thing does. It play nice with ERP systems from the last century. It likes what it's given, I said. It likes timestamps best. They laughed in the way people laugh when they don't know whether to be charmed or warned. The sample packets arrived at the end of the day, and I copied them to a drive labeled camping tent. The PDFs came in 3 resolutions and 4 moods. I ran them through CIVITAS Trace and watched the windows fill. A vendor named Cardinal Paper Comping had an address that matched a shell I'd seen in Yara's case notes with a suite number that multiplied like rabbits. 2 deliveries bore the same truck number, same weight, same driver signature written as if the hand were thinking of something else. The lunch shipments told their own weather. 1 pallet scanned twice a Thursday, delivery stamped Wednesday quantities that turned 30 cases into 33 when the math traveled through 3 desks. I asked for bills of lading. Procurement sent me a photo of a clipboard on a tailgate and winter glove pen coffee ring the corner of a boot. The A in Allen Freight was written in the same hard-pressed hand as the N in Northern Supplies. Some signatures make family where none belongs. The next afternoon, Sloane asked if I wanted coffee. Her office was part office, part stage. Shelves showed framed photos of panels and panels about framed photos. She poured my drink from a carafe that steamed like it had opinions. Mom's been coaching me on donor language, she said, casual as a thrown scarf. She knows everyone on that board. That's useful, I said, and stirred without tasting. My phone on the table stayed dark. The recorder lived somewhere else. You'd love her, Sloane said. She believes in outcomes. She hates chaos. She leaned back. You know how many fellowships I had to stack to get here 5. And yes, some were introductions, but you've heard the phrase show up prepared. How's the preparation measured, I asked. Invites, she said, then laughed at herself. And the work, of course. She swept a hand toward a proposal draft on her screen. A paragraph had the roundness of a sentence I'd read in a different city under a different masthead. We walked the perimeter afterward. She pointed at glass at the water at potential. People respond to a story, she said. It's not lies, it's shape. Shape is a thing you can weigh if you bring the right scale. Riley asked me to stop by Bellevue Plaza, where the rental views looked borrowed. He closed his door and lowered his voice as if sound could crawl under door frames. Look, he said, we move fast because the county slows everything for sport. If there's a shortcut that isn't illegal, I take it. Shortcuts are a symptom, I said. Let the process carry the weight, and you can stop improvising. What do you need to make that true? He asked. A gate, I said. A vendor gate that checks what it can check without calling a meeting. It won't fix character. It will fix laziness. He smiled like a man who'd found a coupon that worked on full price. Send me terms. I sent an onboarding link to a sandbox instance, a thing that looked friendly and was. When he uploaded his test packet, CIVITAS trace logged IP timestamp and the small print that lives on printer margins and doesn't know it's giving itself away. 2 of his vendors overlapped with a warehouse that existed as a phone number and an answering machine greeting recorded in summer. I met Yara on the top deck of a parking garage that shivered in the wind. She leaned against the concrete lip and watched the gulls enumerate the day's spoils. I handed her a drive labeled Lint Trap and a signed chain of custody sheet with the edges straight. Cardinal paper, I said. Has cousins, she said, and slid a folder from her jacket. You've got a duplicate BOL here that thinks it's an only child. See the scuff on the corner. Someone rescanned a paper that's already lived an entire life. We knelt by the low wall and matched scuffs to dates, edges to signatures. She pointed to a line item for 42 cases that became 44 when it traveled from dock to office. It's small until it isn't, she said. Lunch ledger shows the cafeteria manager logging 39, I said. 3 went ghost. Ghosts leave footprints, she said, and taped our envelope with the tamper strip that broke into checkerboard when I tried to peel it. Your windows are clean, she added, nodding toward my laptop. Keep them that way. I walked back through wind that tasted like metal and river. In the lobby, a flyer announced Bright County Scholars Gala with a photo of a ballroom pretending to be a cathedral. I took a copy because it was there. Riley sent a note that night. Your gate works. We'll extend the pilot. He added a smile and punctuation, not emoji. Sloan texted an RSVP link for the gala and a line that read, Would love to acknowledge partners who make our work possible. She appended a clapping hands gif that looped until I closed the window. In the hotel room, I laid the paper trail along the bed intake, screenshots, vendor cross-refs, bills of lading, cafeteria tallies, hashes printed like tiny teeth. The room smelled faintly of lemon and the decision someone else had made to cover a stain. Outside, the river moved like a thing with its own mind. Walter's voice lived somewhere under the traffic drive fixed Mulhall and did not speak. Vivian's did not either. I let silence take the shape of furniture and moved around it. The plant in my Santa Fe studio would need water tomorrow. The fan would click once and keep going. I filed the day's work twice, signed the custody sheet once more, and set the hotel notepad on top with a single word that looked back at me without blinking verified. The gala invitation card sat on the desk between the tamper tape and my key, a square of shine that caught the room's thin light and held it without shaking. The ballroom pretended to be a cathedral glass and green light, a chandelier that thought in facets. A string quartet gave the room a pulse polite enough to hide behind. At the back, technicians tested the wall of LED screens. My window inside CIVITAS Trace waited behind their splash graphics a small square that said tap to verify in a font that didn't apologize. A volunteer pinned a ribbon to my lapel that read Civic Innovation. The ink smelled like new tires. My badge said Nora Quinn in block letters. It sat where a name should sit and behaved. Sloane's heels announced her before she did. You made it, she said, sweeping me toward a row of tables where place cards marched in tidy formation. Her jacket had a sheen that turned heads the way a coin does when it spins. We're featuring partners between the second course and the pledge. Keep it crisp. Keep it hopeful. Hope likes numbers, I said. Guests like headlines, she said, and adjusted a place card until it lined up with an invisible ruler. Riley will intro you. Riley arrived with a cufflink problem and an assistant who solved it. We've got donors from 3 zip codes and 1 senator who thinks he's secret, he said. Our message competence. Competence is verified, I said. He gave me a smile that belonged on a brochure. I like you, he said, and moved on to shake hands that wanted to be shaken. I checked the podium laptop. The provenance window nested as planned file, hash, time, device, custody. The QR overlay waited in the corner like a bouncer who didn't need to flex. I slid a spare drive into a pocket stitched deliberately into my dress. The tamper tape in my clutch gripped its own edges ready. Lights dimmed the way lakes go dark in a fast storm. The quartet's last chord hovered and then sat down. An MC in a bow tie that wanted to be a joke welcomed the room with numbers and adjectives. He called donors generous and programs scalable and children bright, then invited Riley to the stage to say a few words about the engine that keeps Evergreen moving. Riley made engine sound like ethics. He had timing that might have been rehearsed. Tonight, he said we highlight a partner who makes our work cleaner and faster. He gestured grandly. Nora Quinn. My shoes did the walking. The mic was the right height. I laid 2 fingers on the podium to remind my hands they belonged to me. Good evening, I said. My voice took the room without raising itself. Public work lives on paper. Paper remembers what people forget. I clicked once. The LED wall replaced an inspirational gradient with a simple grid. Tap to verify the corner read, and a dozen phones aimed at it in the same instinctual motion people use to check the time when they already know it. A timeline appeared: vendor intake, approval, delivery, payment. Under it, a map opened into an address that should have been a warehouse and was 3 mailboxes behind a building supply store. The vendor name read Cardinal Paper Co. The suite number cloned itself across 3 entities that called each other cousins without blushing. This is a sample, I said. It shows how a vendor repeats when nobody asks why. I enlarged a bill of lading. The scan resolved into paper grain and a coffee ring that begged to be ordinary. Truck number 8213. Delivery. Thursday, I said, and slid the frame 2 inches. Truck number 8213. Delivery Thursday. I tapped the signatures. The N in Northern and the A in Allen had the same hard-pressed bones. A murmur rolled the way weather rolls under a low bridge. A donor leaned closer to his screen. Someone exhaled as if the air had been hoarding itself. Riley stepped toward the podium with a smile that had less brochure in it. Nora's tool helps us catch errors. He said too soft for the mic meant for me. It catches patterns, I said into the mic. I tapped open the custody trail. Hash at 141208, device ID ending 3F1 ingested by sandbox instance, chain verified. The QR in the corner brightened. Phones watched it like a trick and then stopped calling it that. I moved to lunches. This is lunch ledger, I said. The room saw a calendar where deliveries said they were coming and tallies said they had arrived. Thursday shows 42 cases leaving a dock, I said. Cafeteria logs show 39 arriving. 3 cases learned to be air. The cafeteria manager and a hairnet from my pilot appeared on the screen for a second, tapping an interface with a frown that softened and then didn't. I let her face leave. No one needed to know her name. The data stayed. What does this have to do with our gala? A voice from a table asked it like a challenge dressed as curiosity. The senator who thought he was secret pretended to check his program. Verification, I said. We're celebrating it. I kept the room with documents instead of adjectives. I touched the corner of a procurement email and opened a thread where please expedite had become a kind of punctuation. The timestamps stacked like bricks. The metadata window showed an upload from an IP block reserved for Bellevue Plaza time, aligned with a calendar slot named Sloan Pitch. Sloan stood faster than her chair. Context matters, she said. The mic wasn't hers, which made her louder. We move quickly because children don't wait. I nodded to the tech. The audio clip played Sloan's voice in her office, casual and round. Mom's been coaching me on donor language. She knows everyone on that board. You'd love her. She believes in outcomes. She hates chaos. You've heard the phrase, show up prepared. The clip ended before laughter could tell it what to be. A paragraph appeared beside it, The same paragraph that had lived under a different masthead last year, with 3 nouns tucked into new places. The tool drew lines between sentences like a teacher drawing lines between twins in a yearbook. "This is not about style," I said. "It is about provenance." The words sat cleanly without sermon. Vivian rose as if the floor had lifted her. The dress was the color of old roses. She faced the room and reached for a smile that had worked in church basements for 20 years. "Our family has given its time and treasure to this county," she said. "We believe in these children. We don't deserve to be maligned in public." I opened the budget pane. The line items didn't blush. Numbers rarely do. The screen showed a simple table supplies elementary paid twice. Cleaning secondary paid 3 times. A note about a grant requirement that had been met on paper and failed to climb off the pallet. The bills of lading sat side by side scuffs-aligned dates that had learned new birthdays. "Who told you to play this?" she asked me. Voice threaded with a fury that thought itself righteous. "Paper tells itself," I said. Walter stood half an inch, then sat. His hands worried a napkin into a rope. He stared at the tablecloth as if the linen had bolts he could tighten. Riley found a tone between charm and warning. "Nora, this is unnecessary. We hired you. You could have shared findings internally." "I submitted internal reports," I said. "They have receipt numbers." "This borders on defamation," he said, and gestured vaguely toward the legal department, where a man in a suit wore a tie with tiny anchors. The legal counsel cleared his throat but did not stand. The senator pretended to look fascinated by his own place setting. I opened the custody window to full screen. "Chain of custody begins here," I said. The grid showed 2 drives logged, one labeled camping tent, one lint trap, check-ins and signatures, time stamps that did not wobble. Independent review scheduled. Inspector General representatives are on site. Yara stood in the aisle near the back denim jacket, and the steady expression of someone who counts before anyone else remembers numbers exist. She raised a hand, just enough for the nearest usher to notice. 2 staffers approached each with a sealed envelope and a receipt pad. The envelopes wore tamper tape that would print checkerboard if someone tested their mood. I signed where the pad asked me to sign. The nearest camera found my hand and decided it mattered. I handed one envelope to the man from the county office, whose badge lanyard had collected tired conferences. The other I placed in front of Evergreen's counsel, who looked at the tape, then at me, then at his pen. He signed with a care that made the signature look like thinking. The screens behind me collapsed the windows into a single map of relationships, vendors, shells, office blocks, deliveries. Lines traveled like transit routes. The QR in the corner waited for anyone who cared to check the same windows on their phones. The room had quieted into something that made the quartet hold their bows. Sloane's voice tried a new register. "Is this a performance?" she asked, softer and to me. "You want attention?" "I want names on the right lines," I said. Vivian stepped closer to the stage. "Come with me," she said low enough that only the first row heard. "We can fix this without spectacle." "You fixed it without witnesses," I said. "This is a room." Walter found his feet. "We are family," he managed, the words stiff from disuse. I recognized the sentence and let it pass. The MC shifted, unsure where his smile should live. A donor coughed. Another scanned the QR and took a photo of his own screen like he didn't trust his eyes. Security did not rush. They were the kind that knows how to stand in the right places. Doors at the back stayed closed until the program said otherwise. A reporter near the sidewall watched the room through a lens that made distance personal. I clicked once more. The wall returned to the GALA soft gradient. The quartet tried a chord and found it. The MC thanked our brave truth-tellers and forgot to make it sound like a line. He announced a short pause before dessert. The lights brightened enough to remind people they had faces. I stepped away from the podium and into the wing where the carpet absorbed sound like a promise. Yara met me with the professional relief of a person whose paperwork has behaved. Up close, the patch on her jacket read, "Forensics is a verb," as if it had been earned after midnight. "You kept the windows clean," she said. "Tap to verify," I said, and the phrase felt less like a feature than a temperature. A staffer handed me water with a slice of lemon thin enough to be a suggestion. My hands were steady. The ribbon on my lapel kept its shape. I reached into the pocket stitched into the dress and touched the spare drive I hadn't needed yet. The tamper tape in my clutch pressed a pattern into itself and held. Out in the ballroom, forks found plates. Voices tried normal and overshot it. The chandelier showed everyone to themselves in pieces. I stood in the service corridor, where the air ran cooler and honest, and listened to footsteps pass and fade, then pass again. The service corridor held a cooler honesty than the ballroom. I finished the water, pressed the empty cup flat, and slid the spare drive back into the stitched pocket. When I stepped outside, the night had gathered cameras. Flashes stitched a white thread through the dark. I kept my badge visible and walked past the loading bay where boxes waited for trucks that knew their routes. Morning smelled like paper and disinfectant. The county office had a metal detector that beeped for belts and nerves. A clerk with a pen on a chain read my statement out loud, pause by pause, as if accuracy lived in breath. I signed where the margin said sign here. The receipt tore in a straight line that pleased us both. Days arranged themselves into appointments and calls. Riley's firm went quiet, then careful. An interim notice appeared on their letterhead so crisp it could cut. Agents boxed files without hurrying. In the lobby, a framed photo of a holiday party leaned against a fern. Someone set it upright and then left it there staring at the hallway. 3 months marked themselves on calendars and wrists. In a courthouse window, a poster warned about scams that promised to fix everything. Riley arrived with a lawyer whose tie did not step on its own tail. He looked smaller without the office. A week later, a plea was entered in a voice that chose each syllable like a tool and set it down. The sanction felt administrative and permanent, at the same time barred from the work he had worn like a suit. He left through a side door that closed softly, at evergreen conference rooms filled with the smell of new toner and old worry. Sloane stood in a glass corridor holding a cardboard box that did not suit her jacket. HR offered a folder with benefits information and a sentence that had learned how to be kind without promising anything. The board chair spoke into a microphone that didn't need him. A release went up with 3 paragraphs and a 4th link to policies about originality and citations. A university logo appeared on screens with a statement about standards and a line that sounded like a door latching degree rescinded. In my Santa Fe studio, the fan clicked once and kept going. Lunch Ledger pushed an update while the courtyard gave up its heat. I toggled a setting that took the price off for schools that spent more on mops than on missions. The change propagated the way good rumors do quietly, then everywhere. The cafeteria manager from the pilot sent a message with 2 words, and a period saved hours. I replied with one, good. Vivian and Walter occupied the kind of offices where binders learn to stand at attention. Auditors came with fluorescent patience. They spread receipts like playing cards and asked each card what game it thought it had been in. Licenses paused, then stopped. Responsibilities were reassigned. At the house, a realtor suggested taking down family photos so buyers could see their own lives instead. The china set appeared online with a description that named the pattern and not the dinner's. The listing said gently used. The price dropped twice. Voicemails accumulated like snow that refuses to drift. We're ready to talk. There's been misunderstanding. We're sorry for how things looked. Their voices moved through apologies and bargains and sentences built like nests. My attorney forwarded summaries and kept the recordings. I listened to one until the word family thinned out. I stopped there and let other people hear the rest. A postcard arrived without a return address, a photo of Lake Superior looking like steel reheated. The back held 6 words in a hand that might have been Vivian's if Vivian had learned restraint. We're in town Thursday. Coffee V. I put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a chili. I left it there for a week. Then I called a diner off the highway where the coffee tasted like something you could stand on. They came smaller, as if the drive had folded them. Vivian's dress was practical and tidy. Walter's shirt made a case for itself with starch. The waitress poured coffee and left the pot a kindness that ignored categories. Vivian spoke first. We've suffered, she said, not as a claim but as a headline. The community has turned cruel. Walter watched the window. We want to put this behind us, he said, and the pronoun looked for a place to land. The table had water rings from people who'd been careful before us. I placed my hands on either side of one and looked at the circle until it stopped pretending to be endless. I forgive you, I said. The words arrived without lace or trumpets. I'm finished carrying what doesn't have my name on it. Vivian's shoulders loosened as if forgiveness were a chair. Then you'll help, she said, almost gentle. A letter, a call, anything. No loans, I said. No introductions. No work from me that hides what work should do. Walter touched the edge of the napkin and kept his voice even. We are your parents. Your people, I said. So am I. Silence sat with us and didn't apologize. The waitress refilled the coffee. Vivian reached for the sugar, then didn't. You've changed, she said. I stopped asking paper to love me, I said. It only remembers. We paid separately. Outside, the heat had opinions again. They stood by the parking lot lines as if lines could advise. Vivian looked like she wanted to try a different sentence and couldn't find one. Walter opened his mouth and closed it. I nodded and walked toward the sun-bleached sign that told drivers which way the interstate had decided was north. Evenings lined up in a row that felt like a life. The pottery shop's kiln exhaled warm breath that smelled faintly of rain that would never fall. I met the chef from the food truck at the end of the block, the one who'd handed me that first taco months ago. His name was Micah Park. He burned tortillas on purpose for 1 second and called it flavor. We counted orders and bad jokes and the exact hour when the plaza went from chatter to hush. He kept a crate for me near the register where I could park my laptop and be another moving part. On Tuesdays, the plaza hosted a market where a man sold tools older than their labels. I bought a tape measure because it made a sound I trusted. On Thursdays, a trumpet from somewhere practiced the same 12 bars until they learned to be a whole song. The fan clicked once, the plants forgave, and then forgot. I took a meeting in a boardroom with glass that liked its reflections. I stood at the end of the table and didn't shrink. A superintendent frowned at the interface until it made sense, then asked if we could leave it that way. We could. I walked out with my hands empty and my shoulders even. Some nights, I sat on the studio steps with Micah. After closing, the air cooling in increments you could feel. We split a line between us and squeezed it over a paper tray of something good. Above us, the sky kept its own ledger. No one owed it anything. No one argued with it either. Back inside the studio, owned a quiet that knew my name. I labeled a folder with a date and an hour and saved the day's work twice. I washed the skillet that had belonged to someone else, then set it to dry and did nothing while it did that. The fan clicked once and kept going. The tape measure lay on the table, chalked with a fingertips memory of the day, and CIVITAS trace glowed on the screen with a window open to a line that pointed at no one in particular, and everything that mattered. Verified. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.